So as Anka's mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing from an AI perspective. We're going to look at some insights from our data, some customers of ours in your vertical, your peers. And then we're going to talk about how we can use our tools to help you uncover some risks, some threats, maybe some interesting telemetry maybe you didn't think about before, maybe things you can take onward into the business and start building programs around. Because ultimately we need to understand who's been attacked by what to make sure your programs are as successful as possible. By way of an introduction, as Anki said, I'm an engineer at Proofpoint. I worked at Proofpoint for a little over 9 years. Prior to that, I was at another cybersecurity SaaS vendor. So I've been in the email filtering game for way too long at this point. Although I'm an engineer today, prior to that, I did professional services. Prior to that, vendor support. Prior to that, help desk. So although today I sell it, I've deployed it, I've supported it, and I've used it. So it sometimes gives me a different viewpoint to maybe some of the marketing or product people that host these meetings. As I said, I'm a techie. I like getting involved in the data. I like getting involved in the tools. So hopefully, if there are questions later on, I can address whatever it is you guys need to know. Favorite RFC? I assume everyone in the crowd has a favorite RFC. My favorite RFC is RFC 821. This is the RFC for Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This was written in August 1982. It's 43, coming up on its 44-year birthday. This RFC, when it was written, it's 13,000 words, 68 pages long. The word security does not appear once in any of those pages. This protocol was designed for deliverability. It was deliberately designed to accept unauthenticated traffic. What that means is a lot of the problems we deal with today and a lot of the exploits and attacks that the attackers are doing are because we're using an inherently insecure protocol by design. So we need additional tools, we need additional features in place to make sure we're as secure as possible, because we are really using quite old technology on a day-to-day basis. Every good presentation starts with numbers. Two numbers I'm going to use today, both result in a 91% stat, which is obviously part of the marketing campaign that we used. But the cybersecurity breaches surveyed by the UK government in June 2025 found cybersecurity breaches or attacks against 91% of the higher education institutes interviewed. Again, this was pre-Canvas, so that number may well be 100% now. And a report from JISC, where they looked at over 16,000 incidents in 2025, they found that phishing was the initial access route for bad actors in 91% of those cases. So the question is, why are the numbers so high and why are they getting higher? Again, I'm going to keep referencing Canvas because it's the hot topic, but the Shiny Hunters guys have made quite a bit of money in the last couple of days for a successful cyber attack. There is a lot of bad actors that are obviously trying to get some of that money themselves. So we are going to see an increase in these attacks, especially when we think about AI. AI is accelerating the volume and the quality of attacks that we see. We looked at our telemetry in 2025 versus 2024, and we saw a 94% increase in the amount of threats. Not sure if you're aware of who Proofpoint are and where we sit in the market, but a way of sort of framing this is we see around about a quarter of the world's email. Last year, we scanned 2.3 trillion emails. That's 2 with 12 zeros at the end. 20 trillion URLs as part of that. We see attacks against the most targeted organizations in the world. We get to detect sandbox, create signatures on all those advanced threats. And obviously the telemetry we get means we can make sure every end user, every customer is as protected as possible. And this line is not going to go down in 2026, obviously. Again, I think Canvas is quite an interesting point, but we've seen an increase in attacks just in the last couple of days related to Canvas. And it's not specific to them necessarily. It's opportunistic bad actors sending out phishing campaigns to end users. Subjects of things like forgotten password, Canvas, or reset your password. They're prying on people, reacting to what they're seeing in the news. They're relying on them, clicking on links and trying to make sure the end user is as safe as possible. But they're impersonating Canvas. They've got nothing to do with it. They're just literally trying to get the user's end creds. What we've also seen actors do is send out messages to say, I can make sure your data is safe. I can make sure you're protected. Just pay some Bitcoin into this wallet and we'll make sure you're safe. Again, it's purely opportunistic bad actors. The end user is worse off for engaging with that than they would be without it. So that threat telemetry across all our customers is really important because we can react to those new threats, the new emerging things, and make sure everyone's as protected as possible. And we can give you that telemetry so you can then go on and educate your users about what they're potentially seeing, even if we block it. It's not just the vendors that are saying AI is being used. You may well be aware of some of the reports published by some of the larger players in this area, but ChatGPT, OpenAI have said that they've seen foreign actors use their tool to create persuasive emails in local languages. Google published that Gemini has been used for C2 creation and data exfiltration, and Claude has been used to automate large portions of attacks. There's quite a large public example of this where they found Chinese APT actors using their tool to automate some intrusions. So the bad actors are using AI in the same way that we're using AI. There's also other services out there that are taking this one step further, services like Spam GPT. That's something you've not come across before. This is a service that an end user can subscribe to, and it will give the bad actor prompts, it will give them suggestions, it will give them laws, it will give them deliverability information. It's literally a marketing campaign tool. You can give it a set of people you want to attack, and it will give you suggestions on how to attack them successfully. Very low subscription fees. What that means is it really lowers the barrier of entry to any bad actor or script kiddie with a chip on their shoulder to start attacking large organizations. Theoretical or hypothetical question of the crowd: what do AI equipped threat actors actually care about? Well, if we think about the world before AI, bad actors were looking at stealing credentials, taking over accounts and maintaining persistence, moving laterally within a business to where the data is stored or accessed, taking that data, and then ultimately making money, either through selling the data or burning everything to the ground with ransomware. After AI, what are the bad actors trying to do? Well, it's the same list. The bad actors haven't changed. What has changed is the speed, scale, and sophistication. It's not changed the intent, but it's changed how quickly and easily bad actors can attack organizations. Social engineering is now faster and more believable. The messages sound like real people. They're not obvious phishing. The old look for a typo, look for bad grammar doesn't work anymore when a bad actor can use something like ChatGPT to say, create me a local language law. Attacks don't stop at email, they move across channels. We see examples where Teams is being used, WhatsApp is being used quite frequently as part of a cyber attack campaign. The unfolding stages, they're not single events. There was a news article this week about a water organization in the UK. Klopp ransomware group were in their network for nearly 2 years before they found out. So it's not always just quickly a smash and grab and get out. Often bad actors can be in there for a very long time. So we really need to reframe our mindset. Instead of thinking about AI as creating new attacks, really it's AI is amplifying attacks that already work. So then your viewpoint doesn't get to be, how do I make sure I'm protected from AI? Really, it should be understanding who's being attacked by what, which means your defenses can be more relevant. Lots of different people are attacked by different things for different reasons. You might have bad end users targeted with phishing, and it's because a bad actor wants to get into somebody's account to then use that to either harvest data, move laterally, or impersonate that user. Or they could be targeted with malware, remote access trojans, keyloggers, because they want to get access to a machine or data from a machine. The incident response, the triage, even the technical controls you put in place to protect you from them are very, very different. You can't defend everyone from everything. You need to make sure your tools and user education is specific and relevant to each individual user. So to frame that a little bit, I took some data from higher ed organizations across the UK and South Africa to help try and understand a bit of risk to make this kind of relevant to you guys. 123,000 users, 6 months of data went into this, over 500,000 threats, over 500,000 threats. And what we found, technology and IT services were the most attacked by quite some way. When I thought about why this might be, it became quite obvious. These are the guys that have got access to everything, typically within an organization. They've typically got admin access into everything. If you get into a sysadmin or a help desk user's account, you've typically got a lot of different pivot points or a lot of access to bury yourself into some hidden corners of the network and make sure your attack is as successful as possible. So maybe that one isn't so much of a surprise. The library service is second and faculty third. That was a surprise to me. But again, when I thought about it, these are the kind of end users that may be able to email anyone in a whole organization, student or staff. These are the people that may have access to things like calendars or history of an end user. So they aren't necessarily segmented into their own department, where the pivot points or jumping off points are restricted. These are the ones that have got access, a broad access across a whole, potentially a whole organization. Excuse me. And then what they're being attacked by also becomes super important. Credential phish being the biggest volume of attacks is not necessarily a surprise. Cred phishing is the lifeblood of future attacks. It's how bad actors propagate further, either within an organization or externally to contacts. So I actually removed cred phish from the report to change the scaling a little bit and make this a little bit more interesting and relevant. And click fix or fake updates clearly stands out as the next common attack type by volume. If anyone isn't aware of this type of threat, the bad actor will typically compromise a legitimate website. They will use a JavaScript redirector, sometimes an iframe, to pop up over the top of the page to tell the end user they can't view this site unless they carry out an action. That action will typically be either running an installer, which isn't really an installer, it's a backdoor for a bad actor, or it's to run a command. Hit the Windows key, the website will populate the clipboard quite helpfully. User hits Control-V, hits enter, and have now opened up a backdoor on their machine to an end user by literally carrying out the attack on the bad actor's behalf. We see lots and lots of threat actors using this technique. It's incredibly common. We've seen some of the big bad Russian and Chinese APTs start to use this too. And when they roll in, you know it's going to be a successful attack type. So this again is where education is super important. A screenshot of, if you see this, don't carry out the action is sometimes enough to make sure users are not going to interact with those threat types. Other kinds of interesting attacks are the attacker in the middle, browser in the browser, OAuth abuse attacks. These are all kind of similar in that the bad actor will typically host a website, reverse proxy a connection into a legitimate authentication service, which is typically Office 365. The end user will see a normal looking login page, not realize they're not on Microsoft's page, enter their credentials, the bad actor passes them back through to Microsoft's backend. If there is an MFA requirement, that's going to pass back through to the user. As soon as they enter in their rotating code, respond to an SMS, whatever it is, the bad actor can harvest any session cookies, harvest any of those rotating codes, fire it off to Telegram, log in at the same time as the end user, or store the session cookie to replay the login later on. Incredibly dangerous, incredibly simple, and because it's a legitimate website, there's no phishing. An end user may be expecting to visit that website. They may have received a newsletter or a marketing message or be communicating with someone they know and trust. So there's a greater likelihood of them interacting with it. So knowing who's being attacked by these types of threats, again, is super important from an education perspective. And then we look at who's potentially likely to engage with an attack. Some of these department names are familiar, but there's some sort of skewing of the stats here as well, because potentially you may have one end user within a department that's a heavy clicker or that's heavily targeted, and that can maybe change the viewpoint of this. But I think looking at it from a department perspective is maybe helpful, again, from an education perspective, rather than pointing the finger at one user and saying, you're introducing risk, you're causing us problems, and potentially getting HR involved, which I have seen way too many times. Instead, the conversation becomes you as a group need to help each other. Make sure you're helping and encouraging and having extra eyes on a threat before an end user engages to make sure that users are as protected as possible. At the end of the day, if you can stop a user from clicking on a threat or engaging with the threat, whether it's through user education or additional controls, the amount of incidents you guys need to investigate drops dramatically. Another interesting report that came out of this over that 6-month period was understanding if users are targeted frequently or less frequently. Repeated targeting of an end user is a very strong signal that someone really wants to get into their account or onto their machine. Comparing higher ed with some local gov, some federal gov, even some hospital teaching universities shows that there is a very big difference in how repeated this targeting is. 50% of users in higher ed are targeted more repeatedly than the ones that aren't. So that means, again, your training and education can be specifically tailored to these end users that are being targeted the most. So again, having this information, is it a one-off campaign? Are they on a spreadsheet on the dark web? Is their email address somewhere on the internet that a bad actor is crawling it? Is really going to influence how educated and how well your tools are tuned to make sure this user is protected. Final report, this is using a new metric, which is threat severity. So when we evaluate each message, we look at variables like how targeted it is. Is it just sent to one organization? Is it just sent to one vertical? Is it just sent to one country? Or is it a global attack? The threat actor behind it, is it nation state APT? Is it some guy in his parents' basement? Because the end result of those attacks are very different. And the actual threat itself, is it Amazon or eBay credfish versus a very targeted remote access Trojan attack? Because they carry different levels of risk. So using each of those metrics, we can understand the severity of each threat that we identify. You can have one user that receives 10 very high scoring threats versus a user that receives 1,000 very low scoring threats, and ultimately their threat risk is about the same. So again, that telemetry of what's behind those numbers is super important. Material science research departments are targeted the most. That's not really a surprise to me. That's your crown jewels. That's your IP. That's potentially useful to funding parties, maybe some governments around the globe. I have seen examples where departments you wouldn't even imagine would be of interest. Soil is a great example I've seen, where bad actors are targeting this particular department to get access to their research. And understanding how they're going to use that either negatively or positively is potentially another conversation all by itself. But the fact that these departments are targeted probably isn't a surprise. HR is lower down the list. That's kind of interesting. Finance, your student finance probably operates a lot like most banks. So they've got access to payroll information. Maybe they've got access to student bank account information. So that could be of great interest to a particular threat actor. But the other big one here is international students. I speak to a lot of CISOs whose biggest fear is international students getting into departments and stealing research to take it off to other countries. So understanding who's touching what, should they be touching it, are they able to touch it, or even thinking about how your AI tools could be engaging with that is, again, super important. Excuse me. So after all this doom and gloom, how can you protect yourself? Would you be interested in seeing how your departments compare with averages? Do you think you know which users will be most targeted? Because most often organizations aren't necessarily aware of who it is that the bad actors are going after the most. It's incredibly simple for us to run our tool against your data. And we can show this above and beyond anything you've already got. Most organizations use Office 365. There may be some Google houses amongst you, but we can, through very quick implementation, start to pull our data into our tools, run it outbound, and understanding if there are additional threats that your current tools are missing. We have 2.8 million customers globally, including lots of your peer groups. When we run these assessments, we find typically a 30% increase in threats that Microsoft or Google has missed and that sit in an end user's inbox. And we also have a greater portfolio. If we combine all the other tools in our suite, we can sometimes block the likelihood of threat, likelihood of risk, even likelihood of data loss events by up to 75%. And these are the kind of numbers that we can prove to you through these assessments. The way the assessment works, it's typically a couple of clicks through an API. It's free, it's quick to deploy, it's not going to touch any mail flow. There will be no reason for user impact. It's purely a data collection process, but we're going to be able to let you know what's reaching inboxes today. We're going to be able to let you know what the overall risk is to your end users. You can use that risk to be proactive in defenses and start to understand maybe where you're budgeting, where your resourcing needs to be aligned for the next few months. We can show you what types of threats we see as well. Phishing, BEC, malicious attachments are the biggest risks that we see. But again, who's being targeted by what becomes super important. And the way the assessment runs is less about how bad is my tool today, but what more can I do above and beyond what I've already got. So we look at what's reached the inbox, what the user is exposed to, and how we could have removed that, resolved that, prevented that, and obviously reduced that risk. Thank you very much. Any questions, fire them into chat while Jordan is running his presentation. And if there's anything I need to speak to later on, I'll do it. Oh, sorry, just a quick question from Darius. It's pretty simple, and apologies if I didn't make that clear on the last slide. But it actually runs a historical scoring system where it will look at all the messages a user is sent and received, build up a profile of what's normal for an end user, start to understand patterns, to start looking at sort of abnormalities in that traffic. So we'll be able to score. I'll provide you, sorry, a two-week look back window of threats, but we'll also enter a scoring window from that point forward. So we'll give you historical data, but from the moment we activate it, we can also give you live data going forward, and typically 14 to 30 days of data, depending on what your requirements are, what data you want to see is kind of standard for us.
Perfect.
No problem.
I think that answers Darius's question. But thank you, Lee. Thanks for that. That was really insightful and some great perspective on how the threat landscape is actually evolving. So thank you so much. I don't see any further questions in the chat, but please do drop your questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end. Lee and Jordan will actually address them. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jordan Smith. He's a sales specialist at Proofpoint. Jordan focuses on human side of email security and data protection around accidental data loss and user behavior. And in this session, he'll be covering risks around misdirected emails and exfiltration to personal accounts. He'll also cover why organizations are moving away from traditional rule-based approaches. And he'll also cover how behavior analysis can help identify real risks. I'll hand over to you, Jordan.
Great, thank you. And yeah, hey everybody, thanks for joining. So in terms of what we're going to go through in the kind of second part of this webinar is all to do with the outbound side of email security. So we're focused a lot on, how can we protect against things that are coming into our organization, but how do we ultimately prevent things that are going out that maybe either shouldn't be leaving the organization or potentially are going out but to the wrong person. And kind of my area of focus is on our DLP technologies, and what I'm going to take you through is something called an adaptive email DLP. Now, really this is focused in on kind of two key areas, and I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about both of them, but the first one is all to do with what we call with misdirected emails, right? Which is all to do with where, users, maybe lecturers, students, etc., are sending emails to the wrong person. And then the second part is what we call email exfiltration, which is where people may be taking data, research papers, etc., and sending that to their personal email account. Now, I think this problem is quite an interesting one for this particular audience, because often this is a bit of a hidden risk. This is not something that is very easy to get visibility over. And also it's also quite difficult to quantify, because you often don't know how many times a misdirected email is happening within your organization. You don't know, if people are taking your data and sharing it to their personal email accounts. So hopefully what I go through today is how we can both protect the inbound and also what is leaving the organization via the outbound. Now, to kind of set the scene on this, I wanted to give a couple of examples around some of the scenarios that we're seeing within your space around where data breaches have occurred before. And there's a couple of published examples that I've just brought up on the screen here, which help to really illustrate, this is a real problem that is happening. And the first example that I have is University of East Anglia, and these are all, public, right? I'm not exposing anything here that isn't public, but this is where a spreadsheet that was containing a student's kind of circumstances to do with their well-being was accidentally emailed to around 300 students. And this was because somebody made an autocomplete mistake. So they tried to send an email to this particular student, but they, typed in a couple of letters, hit enter, and all of a sudden they sent it to a group that was auto-filled to over 300 recipients. So this was obviously a big data breach for them, because they'd inadvertently exposed student information to a very large group of people. And this is something that I think if we went around the call, right, there's probably a lot of people have made mistakes where they sent emails to the wrong person. And I think sometimes it's just kind of trivial. It's like, oh, sorry, can you please delete that? But what about when it's not? What about when it contains student data, or it contains company sensitive data or sensitive data, right? That's where problems can occur and data breaches can actually happen. The middle example, again, as well, was a similar incident, but separate, where some information around a student's health, again, was shared with over 300 postgraduate students. So again, they'd shared with the wrong group. They'd made an autocomplete mistake and inadvertently exposed some quite sensitive information about a particular person. And then a third example as well is when a particular organization had identified an employee that had forwarded all of their work emails and attachments, which contained personal and also health data, to their private email account. So this was company sensitive data they had chosen to share with their own Gmail account. And this organization historically had no visibility over this happening. And ultimately, this was a data breach. So these are the types of things, some publicized cases of where, these kind of issues are occurring. And what I'll go into now is talk a little bit around why I think this is happening, and also what Proofpoint is able to do to help prevent some of this, and also help you get organization over, like, if this is happening. So why are these data breaches happening, and why also are they at an all-time high, right? We know that data breaches are happening every day for lots of different organizations, and I think a lot of that comes down to the human layer of cybersecurity. We're dealing with humans on a daily basis, and humans make mistakes, right? And it's very difficult to put static rules and policies in place to try and prevent against human behavior, because human behavior is in black and white, right? You can't write a rule for it. And what we're really seeing across, organizations that we work with is that a very high percent of CISOs and cybersecurity professionals that we work with, 87% of them see employees as the biggest cyber risk to their business, right? Not systems, people, because people are the ones that are interacting constantly with the external world and are letting things into the organization. And that's where the problem often lies. And then to drill a little bit deeper, 33% of employees kind of admit to sending 1 to 2 misdirected emails per year. So if you kind of, extrapolate that across all of your organization and how many employees you have, there are probably a lot of misdirected emails that are happening that are hidden. Some of these might be fine, but some of them may potentially be data breaches that we might want to expose. And another interesting stat is that only 1% of users are responsible for 88% of the data loss events. So often it is particular users that are the reoccurring offenders. And often that comes down to human behavior. Like, we tend to repeat similar behaviors. So if somebody is continuously sending data to their personal email address, they might continue to do that, whereas someone just might never do it, right? So we want to heighten what those risky users are and allow you to make controls, or allow you to put controls in place. Also, like, the data that your users have access to is kind of at an all-time high, right? Organizations, if we take someone that works in finance, for example, they have access to billing information, banking details, the actual banking platform, maybe credit card details, really sensitive stuff that they can choose to send out to the business. They could choose to try and share it out via their personal email account, or upload it to OneDrive, or, copy and paste it into ChatGPT, something to that nature. You got people that work in HR that have access to payroll data, have access to employees' sensitive information, their health benefits. Then you have people that work in sales that have a lot of access to customer data, pricing information, customer emails, things like that. All of this data have people within the organization have access to, and it's very difficult to try and control via rules around what can be sent out and what can't. So what we're really trying to do here is use behavioral AI and machine learning to help understand user behavior on email, and understand if potentially people are sending data out of the organization that they shouldn't be, that is unique to them. So let's think about misdirected emails first, before we then come on to talk about email exfiltration. Now, I tend to always refer to misdirected emails as an iceberg risk. So typically organizations that I talk with, they tend to see like the tip of the iceberg, which is where maybe some users, they come to them and say, they report it to IT and they say, I've sent an email to the wrong person by mistake. Can it be recalled? Well, the answer to that question is no. You can't properly recall an email that's been sent externally, because what happens? The recipient receives an email that says the person wants to recall it, and everybody then looks at that email, right? So it's not a proper way to mitigate against sending emails to the wrong person. Some people choose to put delays on their email. They put a delay on for 30 seconds, which might help for the first couple of times, but then after, people then just don't check their email after they've sent it. So what we tend to see is when we look beneath the surface, we unearth a lot of what's going on that are hidden risks and hidden visibilities of where users are sending emails to the wrong place. Within the UK, we have something called the ICO, which is called the Independent Commissioner's Office, which is where data breaches are reported to. Now, the number one reported incident to the ICO is misdirected emails due to a data breach. So not phishing, not credential harvesting, misdirected emails. So this is a genuine problem that a lot of organizations are facing. And if I go back to my first slide, right, you know, that example of somebody sending a student, you know, students' health information to over 300 other postgrad students, that's a material problem that has material risk. So we want to stop that from happening. So how do we do this, right? And I think a lot of organizations, and probably a lot of you on the call today, you will be doing some type of rule-based DLP, maybe on email. You might have a rule that's configured within Purview. You might have a rule that's configured within your email gateway today. There might be doing some, you know, don't send an encrypted file to a Gmail account, right? You might have a rule like that in place. Or, you know, if you've got an MIP label in place, if an MIP label is seen that is restricted internal, don't send external. Something to that nature. Ooh, my camera just froze. Hopefully I'm still here. So a lot of organizations are having different rules in place. So what we want to do is ultimately use machine learning to move away from rule-based DLP. So that if we can say, well, instead of you writing a rule for if an Excel file is being sent to a Gmail account, let's specifically understand user behavior and who they normally send emails to. So what this technology does is it's going to go back 12 months. So it's going to connect an API into your Microsoft, your G Suite environment, and it's going to do a historical look back where we essentially look at email metadata about who your users normally send information to try and build up a pattern of behavior. So, you know, to use myself as an example, who do I normally email on a daily basis and what do I email them about? What does Lee email to, you know, who does he email and what does he email about? Like, we're going to have very different sending behaviors because we talk about different things to different clients. What that then means is that if something changes about my behavior, maybe I go to send an email and I'm talking about Project Alpha and I send it to, you know, person A, but actually I've never communicated with person A before about Project Alpha, but there's somebody else that has a similar name that I normally that I communicate with about Project Alpha. Our technology is going to understand that there's a slight change there and something looks off. So then we're going to be able to jump in and ultimately prevent the user from sending that email. So in terms of just this data piece here, a couple of points to hit off. So the technology is plugging in via API. It's going to pull historical metadata, and all of that data is stored in EU. So it's an AWS data center in Dublin. What this then ultimately looks like, as an example email here. So we have, you know, Julia that's sending an email. We have Sandra that's sending an email to Julia, talking about Project Idaho. Okay. Now our technology is going to analyze this email when they hit send. And it's going to essentially ask the question of, do we believe this is going to the right person, or do we believe there is another recipient that has a stronger correlation with what's contained within the email? Now, if you was using rule-based DLP, Julia Smith is not on a deny list. There's no regex that are contained in the body of this email. There's no data classification tag. There's no MIP label. There is nothing that rule-based DLP can pick up on here to suggest this is going to the wrong place. But what our technology can do is it can use the AI to essentially understand the behavior of this email has changed. So the recipients are not normally seen on the emails together, which are contained within here. They're talking about Project Idaho, which we believe to be a sensitive project that is not normally communicated with this recipient. And also the attachment content is not associated with the recipient. And we're basing this off all the historical data that we've ingested. So then what happens then in this scenario is the user would then receive a pop-up that looks a little something like this. So this is native to their Microsoft environment. It's an add-in that's deployed that would enable this pop-up. And it's enabling us to essentially say, look, you're sending an email to the wrong person. We think you should be sending it to this person and allow them to course correct. So to apply that to higher education, right? If you're emailing potentially a student or you're emailing a third party and we believe you've attached the wrong file, or you've attached the wrong student details, or you've attached the wrong feedback form, our technology is going to be able to jump in and prevent the email from being sent and warn the user, ultimately preventing that accidental data loss. I kind of describe it a little bit sometimes as like that Friday afternoon, right? Where you accidentally, you know, send an email, you're not thinking, you're tired, and it goes to the wrong person. So that is the email misdelivery part. Now, quickly then to just move on to the email exfiltration, which is all to do with people sending data to their personal Gmail account. We're going to use the exact same approach here, using behavioral AI, which is going to go back in time and identify users' personal email accounts. So it's going to be looking for a couple of different things, right? It's going to be looking for sending behavior. So when someone emails their personal Gmail account, it tends to follow the same patterns, i.e., if I forward my payslip to myself every month, I don't address it saying, "Hi, Jordan, please see payslip attached." And then I don't reply to myself saying, "Thanks for the payslip," right? That'd be a bit strange. So what we can then detect is that when you normally send things to your personal email account, that you don't address the email, and often it's a one-way email exchange. Also, we tend to see the similar sort of things being sent. So lots of forwarding, with an FW in the subject, or just an attachment and no email body, or no subject entirely. All of these data points allows us to match users up with their personal email accounts. Now, what I would say is that when we think around then identifying data that's being sent, a lot of people tend to think around bad actors, people deliberately trying to steal data from the organization. And actually, that's just not true. The majority of data loss that we see is careless users, people that are just not following IT policy and are potentially sending data to their personal email account because they're not thinking. Like they want to access it from home, they want to print it, something to that nature. So what our technology is then going to do is we're going to use machine learning to essentially classify the document to say, okay, do we believe this contains sensitive data or not? If we don't, maybe it's a payslip, it's a train ticket, it's a hotel booking, we're going to tag this as non-sensitive. And most organizations can then customize to say, okay, non-sensitive events, we allow people to send to their personal Gmail account. But if maybe it contains student data, or it contains finance information, or it contains data that's related to your particular university, that then becomes sensitive. And then maybe we don't allow the user to send, or at the very minimum, we warn the user to say, okay, you probably shouldn't be sending this email to your personal Gmail account. But most importantly, we give you visibility over it. So there's several different things that can then be done with this technology, such as enabling you to put warnings in place, allowing you to block the email from being sent. But ultimately, it's getting visibility over what your users are sending to their personal Gmail accounts. The example that I tend to give is, think about data residency. So let's say, somebody is sending emails that are related to their work or contains research papers that belong to your particular organization. They send it to their Gmail account. Their Gmail account doesn't have 2FA enabled. Their password is, I don't know, their dog's name, right? Something that's not very secure. And then their Gmail account gets compromised. Your data inadvertently has then been compromised. So we want to ensure that we're enforcing the right, whatever your organization's right policy is around sending to personal email accounts, so that that data is protected. Now, finally, as Lee was saying, we have quite a nice way to give you some visibility into this data. Via the API, via doing some historical lookbacks, we have the ability to show you both inbound and also outbound assessments. So we can offer for Adaptive Email DLP what's called a data loss risk assessment, which is essentially where we plug in a silent API to your Microsoft or Google Exchange, and we go back 6 months and we ingest all of the data around where users have been sharing to their personal email accounts, and we provide it to you in a report. So we can show you every single time a user has sent an email to their personal email account, what has been shared, what data has left the organization, what attachments have been shared. Essentially, it's a really good way for you to understand if there is a risk to your organization around people sending data to their personal email accounts. And from my, I've done a lot of these with lots of different customers. We always tend to find something that's interesting, whether it's, identifying people that have left the organization and have taken some data with them, or whether it's, people are repeatedly sending every single email to their Gmail account, which they probably shouldn't be doing, or maybe some people have, some bad behavior around sending student information to their personal Gmail account. But all of this can be achieved through the silent API, which is something that we'd be able to do for you. Nothing's needed to be deployed to users. It's just purely an API into your Exchange environment, and then we can pull this report for you. So that was everything that I wanted to go through on the outbound side of email security today. So I don't know if there's sort of any specific questions we can open up for any Q&A that anybody might has. But that was everything that I wanted to go through today.